None of VPM Partners, Bob Kendall, or any of its officers, directors, employees, other personnel, representatives, agents, or independent contractors is, in such capacities, a licensed financial advisor, a registered investment advisor, or a registered broker-dealer. None of VPM Partners or its personnel gives investment or financial advice or makes investment recommendations, nor are any of them in the business of effecting trades or directing client equity accounts or giving futures trading advice tailored to any particular client situation. Nothing contained in VPM Partners broadcasts, on its websites, or in its written materials constitutes a solicitation, recommendation, promotion, endorsement, or offer by others described above of any particular security, other investment product, transaction, or investment. Copyright 2014 VPM Partners. All rights reserved. Terms of use apply. Reproduction, adaptation, distribution, public display, exhibition for profit, or storage in any electronic storage media in whole or in part is prohibited under penalty of law.
And we are live, folks. We decided to go down on the trading floor today rather than always being above it. So we're uniquely down by Tiffany and Company. I'm not sure. My wife likes that place a lot. Anyway, we are doing another show here of Process Warriors, which the plan today is to go more into detail of the aspects of maintaining and building and all the final steps that we didn't do last show. And anyway, so I know everybody was like really trolling Mitch about his sweater. Now he only owns one sweater and one white shirt.
One white shirt, yeah, that's right.
So we're gonna start some kind of fund to buy him different color shirts and colors and different things. Anyway.
Careful, I might have to break out like a Hawaiian shirt or something like that. I do have one of those.
Don't do that. You will never make it on this screen. On that one. Nice try. That I have control over here. So anyway, folks, what we're looking forward today because this is getting into the crux of a lot of issues that we see happen all the time, and it's just trying to get everything cleaned up. We're getting reasonable traction on this. I wish I could get more folks to watch it. Sorry, why does my nose always itch as soon as we get on air? I haven't scratched my nose in a half hour now. It's itching. Anyway, the bottom line is we want to get a lot of issues that are fixed that we've been dealing with. And as we did last time, we're going to go through a PowerPoint presentation. Do want to make just a real quick market comment. Markets can't seem to go 2 days in the same direction again. It's the same event. As I mentioned, I think this is important because we're not seeing any follow through, and this is getting actually, at this point, getting scary. So make sure you're tuning in to Market Thunder in the morning, and we'll be covering this in detail, what's going on here today. Anyway, here in a minute, I'm gonna bring up the PowerPoint. We'll go through the steps. We've got some elements here that we're hoping to be able to show you on screen well enough. We're working on some display resolution areas because we're broadcasting from a Mac Pro, and we're utilizing a PC and a remote kind of location from the broadcaster. So it's kind of weird. There's some limitations, and we're trying to work around those right now as far as display areas on the screen. So let's go ahead and get started, and I'll bring up the screen, and we're going to be doing a Process Warrior thing, and Mitch is covering up the Warriors. We were just talking about how everything seems to be skewed at the wrong side of the screen. But anyway, we'll get through this, and I think today is going to be really helpful for a lot of people, and I'm hoping we're probably going to shoot some emails out to make sure people watch this. That's considering we think it went well. So right now
Yeah, we'll
we're
see.
we're going to hold that one back for a moment.
Cautiously optimistic.
Yeah.
Right?
So let's go ahead and we'll start through this, getting into the process with after a little chit chat. And screening for success, this is called, and maintenance. And this is the, next to what you built in the first place and coming up with that, this is the most important part of having a portfolio when you're using individual equities, because you're actually, the walk forward process is mission critical to maintaining that integrity of the original screen and the process, and making sure that what this is, I guess this has always been my goal, what you set and tell your customers that you're doing for them, that you actually deliver that product. And we've seen a lot of really good talk and a lot of not so much on the delivery side. And it's and the reality is the customers don't know whether you're delivering it or not, the way you said, but you know it, I know it, and it works a lot better from a psychological standpoint when you're really feeling like you're delivering exactly what you said you're going to do. And just going through the last time that we met, we built a growth-focused stock screen. We sorted it by market capitalization. We talked about that in detail. What appears to be random ends up to be more structured than you'd like to give it credit for sometimes. Anything that's repeated over and over the same way, like I talked about then, is you can then actually evaluate the process, and it's critical when, and this flows through to the maintenance, is the steps that you did in screening and filtering still apply at the next level, but there's a couple more steps in evaluating the current builds and all of those type of things that you need to do. So I guess it already talked about, I guess this next one said we selected top, bottom, and middle 8 stocks, and what that was capitalization wise. So we did top down, bottom up, and we grabbed the middle capitalization, and typically this is Bob's idea, but 1 to 25 billion is a pretty good sweet spot on the upside. Sometimes I've done a more focused, more small mid cap down to 1 to 10 billion, and they seem to have more octane. As like I said, what you want to do is find the $1 billion stock that will grow to the $3 billion company, and if that's the case, then you've got a nice 200-300% gains on some of these stocks, and those are the things that actually, when you look at the trade impact charts and all of those elements, that's where the rubber really hits the ground. So I'm going to continue on until I'm lost for some reason. Let's see here. There. Oh, great. I'm clicking.
Jumped ahead too far.
Yeah, well, I'm clicking and nothing's happening. Of course,
Sure.
then all 3 clicks went at the same time. Let me just go one. That's interesting. At least we don't have the delays on the show. What is it about this show? There's always some.
It's the gremlins.
I guess.
Out to get us.
Let's go next. Maybe I can force it to go next. There we go.
There we go.
Wow. Okay. That's fun. So I'm going to let Mitch talk a little bit about this, even though he's in the middle. The numbers aren't important, really.
Right.
Matter of fact, we should make available these spreadsheets and even the PowerPoint. Maybe we should put those out somewhere on the website. So if you want to actually see this material, maybe watch it as we talk about it. You could actually bring it up later if you want to go back and stream it. Of course, that may be way too much pain to do this twice, but I actually think there's a lot of good stuff here. Go ahead, Mitch.
All right, I'm just putting a note down for myself to make sure that I get that done. So as you said, the numbers really don't so much matter. What we're really talking about is the process throughout this whole thing. So just to recap where what we went through last time, as we had talked about, we started with a growth screen. We just grabbed some fairly straightforward metrics to come up with these screens. And then we went through on an annual basis. And actually, of course, now that we're live, I see an error. Should be actually as of last year, 12/31/2013, not 2014. But what we're doing is we're grabbing the list of stocks on an annual basis that pass this screen. And for the portfolio that I created, and maybe we could put that out there as well, so for people to see, we'll show you the list of companies that passed, as well as the impact of all the trades within that. So what I did is I just went back in time just a little bit, just to show you what this process would look like in real time, or in I guess a time capsule scenario. So what I did for the example, just to demonstrate what you can do with it, is I did an annual back test where I just took whatever the screen was as of that time period. I did a hard start and stop with any securities that had fallen off the screen, or any that had just come across the screen, and I moved forward. And so what we're looking at right now is actually the last trading date of last year. We were 71% invested in this sample portfolio, and what you see down at the very bottom, you could barely just see it. Bob's slightly covering it up. But there's only one ticker out of this whole list was actually on both the 2013 list as well as on the 2014 list. So there really wasn't a whole lot of carryovers. Everything that was on this list had pretty much fallen out of favor, at least with the screen, for this next year. So at this point, we were 71% invested. You can see some of the holdings we had been in for quite a while, and a couple of these holdings we'd been in for just about a year or over a year, and others of these holdings we'd been in really just since that month, or maybe a month or two earlier. So at that point, we had a variety of holdings that had different durations, and we had some fairly nice gains on it. The one holdover that we had on this was actually up 112%, so that is a good stock to walk forward on that. So when it comes to moving this forward, the original back test, what I did is I just turned all these off. So if you had looked at this portfolio, you would have seen that I had shut off all these holdings, even the ones that we were still holding on to as of the 1st of 2014, and I brought in that new basket. And Bob, I just wanted to get your feedback on this. What are your thoughts on that type of mindset, where you just do a hard start and stop on a screen and you bring in the new list walking forward?
Well, you're cutting off too many trades that might be in existence, so you don't want to do that. I think we discussed that on the last show a little bit as we started to get into this. But yeah, if you do that, what we're talking about here is if you actually just take the screen, a new screen, and just stop everything that you came and replace new, then, and we've seen this done a lot, where
yeah.
And what happens is you've got some of the best trades on the books, especially not so much on the gross screens, but they could, because a lot of these screens that you might be using are based on ratios, price to, price ratios, PE, what have you. And what happens is the stock starts to change in value for the better. Sometimes the original screen, they fall off the screen, but that's actually a good thing. I guess the most important thing is that they started off at a certain valuation, and you want to walk them forward through their growth and hopefully hyper growth phases as you do this. So if you just replace the screen, you're probably taking out a lot of really good trades. Plus, you're generating a lot more tickets, and cost is going up. Customers seeing all kinds of trades. Gee, why did we get out of that? It was working really well. Well, right. It wasn't on the screen anymore, so you end up taking it out. But anyway, what we're going to talk about today is how to do a rotation, letting VPM do most of the heavy lifting from the rotation standpoint, or otherwise let VPM get you out of these trades. There are some times where we talked about, I know in Market Thunder several times, like some of these stocks that are in buyout mode, or something's happening to them from a corporate standpoint that you might want to have other considerations to take them out. But even then, I would wait till the next screen update. So it might give you a little more cash, sometimes maybe 3 or 4% more cash. It's not going to be material as you're walking this forward.
Okay. Why don't we go to the next slide so we could take a look at the list that had come across for this year.
Really have to go next to get it going.
All right, so what I did is I put on here the list of the holdings that passed the new screen as of really the beginning of this year. And what I also did is I highlighted in yellow all those holdings that are currently flat. So these are the positions that did pass the screen. VPM, at the point that we ran this screen, was not long these positions. And then what I also did is I highlighted the stocks that did have a current position within VPM. Again, only one of these positions that passed the screen carried over. It was, in this case, Swift Transportation. That was long on the last list. It's long on the next list. So, what some advisors have done is they've just done a hard start and stop like we've already talked about. One of the other things that I've seen advisors do is they'll look at this list and say, well, I'm only 71% invested now. I'm going to go ahead and fill in the gaps around my portfolio and go 100% invested as of January 1st, 2014. What are your thoughts on that, Bob, as far as advisors that take that activity?
Okay, yeah, that's good because I was so focused on trying to get that screen to show so people could see what you're talking about. I have no idea what you said.
All right.
Just give me a quick one. I apologize. I'm trying to get this issue that we have fixed while you're talking, and I took us off screen so people can't see me thumbing around at my keyboard. So
prior to the screen, the last trading day of 2013, actually, the portfolio was 71% invested. They come across the new screen. It has a bunch of names that are also long, but it's not part of their current portfolio. And so what a number of advisors have done in the past, mistakenly, is they've tried bumping that up to 100%.
Okay, I know exactly where you're at. Sorry about that. I actually figured it out about your first sentence, but yeah. So you know what? I guess that's just another error that's made is forcing VPM to be longer than it's supposed to be based on current market environment. So the way you do that is you get that new screen, so you go, gee, look at all these, I'll just pick these, and maybe they're even short in the tooth, the 30-30 or the 50-50 rule applies. But in the end, what you're doing is you're actually overexposing your I'm going to bring us back on screen here for a second. You're overexposing, so I thought I was, hang on. That's always interesting, technology. There we go. But you're overexposing the portfolio when you do that. And what happens is it's supposed to be 71% or 70, give or take maybe a stock or two. But if you start to force it, you can force it to be 100% long. And maybe it's not appropriate to be 100% long. For instance, like right now, as we're consolidating, trying to figure out whether this market can actually go higher or not, you end up, maybe you go ahead and say, well, hey, we're going to make the bet and we're just going to rescreen here because it's May and we're redoing our screen. We're just going to let it be 80-90% invested instead of 60. And could be that your shiny coin that you flipped was right and it went up and everything was wonderful. But those probabilities of flipping a coin aren't as much as letting VPM and looking at the overall database positions. So we're at 47%. Typically, what that's going to do is going to have you in a fair amount of cash. At usually about 50% of your stocks are going to be long. So if you go through the process of updating and only taking the stocks, let VPM run the stocks that are in there, and then just replacing the outliers, or otherwise when you're looking at it, just replace the stocks with no positions with other stocks with no positions. And then maybe if there's one or two stocks, maybe there's a stock that's just been on a huge run and it's up 300%, or there was a buyout on it, then you can go ahead and replace that with a 30-30 or 50-50 rule, but keeping the overall percentage invested similar to what you're doing walking forward. And I remember back in 2008, an advisory firm that had decided to do just that. They were friends of Mitch's operation, and when he was back on the other side of the street, and the result was they got 100% long.
Right.
I don't know.
Every January.
Yeah, it was January 1st. So first thing that happened, the first week that portfolio was down 12% because the markets were down 8%. The stocks that they picked just got clocked. And anyway, that was a heck of a way to start 2008, which was about to be a really bad year anyway. The good news is that just by getting back in the process and let it go out, a lot of that stuff was kicked out. But the bottom line is they didn't have to have that big a loss. VPM at the time was about like it is right now, about 60% invested. So, anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a common thing that I've seen. It's this mentality for a lot of advisors is, well, I always want to be fully invested. I always want to be participating in the market. When really at times like this, like in the database, it's really appropriate to be have a portfolio that's in line with the overall database. I think the average stock portfolio right now is, what did we say last? High 50s, low 60% invested.
Yeah, 57 to 60 range. We didn't really run a standard div on that, did we?
We haven't run it yet.
Yeah.
But at the beginning of this year, that it was closer to that 70% range at the beginning of the year as far as the average portfolio. And so we've slowly walked that back some. So I'd say that this is a great example of seeing, in this case, a back test, walking that forward and having it match up with what we're seeing across the database, where if you had forced your portfolio to be 100% invested, you would have done just like what Bob said, and as I saw firsthand, when you put your own human bias into it, your own emotional bias of, well, I want to be getting as much as I can for my clients, and looking out for those stocks that are already long, and taking on those additional positions, what you do is you open yourself up to a little bit more risk. Now, in the case of this portfolio that Bob's referencing, it did end down the year, I think on average, in line with a lot of other portfolios. It was down, I think, 15 to 20% at the worst. So
yeah,
a lot of that had to do.
Most of the hit was up front. That was
a lot of that had to do with that first week.
It was like a rude awakening, the way to start a new year.
January 2008 being what it was.
Yeah.
And so very quickly that portfolio was forced in line with the average portfolio, which was much more passive. And of course, as 2008 played out, it did eventually move to a point where it was 100% cash.
Yeah, but the problem is it didn't feel good till about September.
Yeah.
It felt terrible, and that was like 7 or 8 months of pain that didn't need to be existed. The portfolio probably would have still been down maybe 6 to 8%, which is what the markets were doing, and that was explainable. But some of those numbers were a little bigger. So it really comes down, especially this happened to be a relative strength strategy. We talked about utilizing, I guess IBD 500s or IBD 50, which is a momentum-based screen and technically based. And boy, those things, you do those at the wrong time, and it can be pretty ugly. And it's hard to get through that psychologically. And that's part of what we're talking about here, is trying to keep from setting yourself up for failure in your communications and what you're trying to do with your customers.
So now that we've talked about how to do it wrong for quite a bit, let's talk about how to do it right. So, as you see with this list right here, we have a number of these securities highlighted in yellow. So what I would do if I was running this portfolio in real time back in the end of December, beginning of January, is I'd look at the screen as it existed, or the holdings that I currently had, and I'd hold on to those positions, and I'd look at the positions that I currently am flat in. I have no money invested in, and I'd look at the latest screen, and I'd start grabbing some of the names off the latest screen and rotating out the basket, because then what I'm doing is I'm grabbing these new tickers like ASX, CUZ, and so on down the list. I'm bringing those in because they've just passed the fundamental screen that I'm utilizing to build my investment universe for this portfolio, and I'm giving myself the opportunity to get in early on these stocks at the point that VPM offers a new buy on it. I may also be interested in looking at a screen. Let's say I run it today in real time, and I happen to see that one of these positions has a brand new buy today. What I would do is I'd look at adding that position in, because that's the best time to bring that position into the portfolio. I'm not buying it mid-holding like I would if I had just simply grabbed one of these long positions that have already been invested 50, 100, 200 days. But what I'm doing is I'm grabbing a brand new idea, and not only is it a brand new idea, it's also just gone long on VPM. So I'm getting in on the ground floor of this trade and be able to experience the full cycle of this trade as it goes forward.
Yeah, and that's actually, just to add in something here, is that's what we try to avoid. The whole concept behind the 30-30 and 50-50 rules, because when you're screening, you don't find them always in the beginning, but you can, once you get an existing portfolio walking forward, you can set yourself up for that beginning cycle rather than coming in mid-cycle all the time. And sometimes, just depending on where the markets are, the style box that you're screening, all of that might actually set you to the point where there just isn't anything that isn't already long.
Right.
And that happens. And I would tell you that some of these situations are unique in that you just have to look at what's the best thing to do here. But if you try to maintain your cash, sometimes just leaving some of the old symbols in there that aren't long are okay. And one of the things not a chance we're gonna get to the tracking manual, right?
Well, we're gonna touch upon it. We're gonna talk about the high level concepts.
We're gonna do that. Okay.
That's the next step. So we're gonna talk about what this looks like as you move it forward. So if you want to go ahead and go to the next slide, because that's really where this walks it forward. So once you've made that decision to update the portfolio, that's where we really need to start talking about the tracking manual and the importance of keeping one of these things on hand. So a tracking manual is essential to keeping a clean books of record, making sure that you've labeled out exactly what it is that you're doing with the strategy, what your goal is with it, all the key settings that you use to create it. So in the event that you need to recreate it or you want it to really dig into is you have those on hand. And then also it lists out all the changes that you've ever made within this portfolio. It's very valuable when you go through an audit to be able to provide your tracking manual to an auditor so that they could see what it is that you've been doing within this portfolio.
Yeah, they just want to know you got something other than a dartboard back in the back room flinging it at the wall.
Yeah.
And they want to understand some of the process. But one of the things that is also key here is it forces you into the discipline of walking this forward. And while you're doing your work, it's really not that big a deal. Mitch and I have been talking about, I think since he came on board, putting some kind of actual manual together that you could, even if it was in Word, something that you can download. I used to have old PDFs that were pretty basic that I would hand out back in the mid-2000s, back in 05 and 06, and I would hand these out, and we haven't really done that since. We talk about doing it, but and we've seen some stuff that some of you have created. It's awesome. It's way cool. And maybe we should have like a contest, get a free month of VPM, submit, and we'll pick the best template for doing that. That'd be fun to do. That's how we get folks engaged that are willing to share some of the stuff they're doing. There's a lot of moving parts, but when you're doing this process and you're walking through this thing, it's real simple while you're there at the moment to even have a spreadsheet or a document to get things together and make some notations about maybe you made some exceptions. And I don't think we talked about that yet, but I won't go into it now, but there's certain exceptions that can occur while you're walking forward different situations. They could be something as simple as taxation issues. So maybe you're really close to a long-term capital gain. You're 2 weeks out. There's considerations there. So we'll do a show. I think that'll be down the road. I'll do another promise that we'll do a show that talks about some of the exceptions and some of the things that you want to consider as you're doing these updates. And remember, you're a portfolio manager now, and most of the work is being done by VPM. This is a quarterly responsibility on the book that we're proposing. You have a little monthly review. It's really a benchmark. How am I doing? And asking questions if there's any kind of strange things going on with any of the stocks. This process is not really that necessary when you're doing ETFs or mutual funds. Maybe on an annual basis, some of these elements would apply. But for individual stock, it's real simple to do. And I'm still an old school guy. I like to have that piece of paper around, and you can put it in, a 3-ring binder. Maybe it's 3.5 inches, but because the paper grows if you print out all the stuff that I suggest in some of the old videos and maintaining and walking forward your process.
Yeah, I mean, and that's essentially it. I mean, by keeping track of all these things, it's going to keep you organized. It's going to keep you on the right page, the right path to be able to go forward and be able to walk this and adhere to it and deliver what it is that you had promised the clients you're going to be doing to begin with. Anytime that you have a portfolio like this and you talk about how a portfolio is done historically, one of the things that you have to be able to provide is that history of trades. And so it's crucial that you keep good books of records to be able to back that up either with a client or with an auditor in the event that they ask, well, show me what trades that you did in 2011 or 2013 with this portfolio. So I put out some of the elements here on this slide that you're seeing right now. And first off, you want to list out what the objective is and the methodology to be able to reach that objective. Is this a growth? Is this a value portfolio? And then what are some of the basics components that you're looking at to be able to build this portfolio and achieve the objective? And then also what we tell every advisor to do, so we're gonna beat this dead horse as well. You need to, every time you create a portfolio, you need to jot down, whether it's on a yellow pad in a desk drawer, or if it's something that you print off, you need to keep those settings of what you had constructed your portfolio around, so that in the event that you accidentally delete a portfolio or some bizarre change take place, I can't even think of an example offhand, but you want to make sure that you have some sort of static record that doesn't get changed, so that we can refer back to it and put Humpty Dumpty back together again in the event that
we do have that. We do have that stuff, though, aren't we? Aren't we capturing it? Yeah,
we are capturing that on an ongoing basis, but it's much easier as the advisor to be able to keep this down, because what we then have to do is dig into our resources and find out what changes were made. As we talked about last week, this is something on a weekly basis that we are going and we're watching two key things: the initial allocation factor as well as the inception date, to make.
Yeah, it looks like we lost sound there for a minute. Not sure for how long. Hopefully not very.
Probably not. Probably just once we put the slide up. So, you were talking, Bob, about how easy it is to be able to keep a log of these settings.
Yeah, and like I said, some of the other advantages of by keeping these things, of being able to talk to clients and keep I guess a perspective of everything that you've done and why you've done it. Because let's face it, we're running our businesses. If you do this right, we're going to be in the place of being able to, that's the best way to put it, is communicate everything we do. Most importantly, giving you the confidence to be able to take this thing forward.
Okay. And as Bob did say, this is something that we are keeping track of. It's important that as you try out new strategies, that's a common thing where we see advisors inadvertently change some of these settings. They try to change the inception date to see if how that would have impacted the portfolio by looking further back in time. Every time that an advisor wants to try out some new things, especially if they're in the portfolio construction phase, and they want to see how a portfolio, either back test or a set of mutual funds or ETFs have done in a particular fashion, if they want to look further back in time, what I always recommend is just create a brand new portfolio set further back in time with an earlier inception date. That's going to give you the clearest, cleanest look back to see how this portfolio has performed, and then match that allocation factor with what you previously are running if you want to try that out. Don't adjust the inception date for something that you're already running, because that's going to create issues. And then anytime that you bring in new portfolio or new positions into the portfolio, that allocation factor is going to try adjusting itself. So that's another thing to keep an eye out for. And as we've talked about, we're going to follow up behind you and make sure that that's doesn't get inadvertently changed. In fact, we're going through that process right now. So every Tuesday, we look at your portfolios, make sure that everything is neat and tidy on it, and we watch for any sort of changes. But really what this whole thing does, this tracking manual, it brings integrity to the process. And it's not that you're trying to do anything dishonest. It's just that that as time goes on, it's very easy to allow both your practice as well as your portfolio to get out of line if you're not properly maintaining it, so that what you're actually putting out there may not be what it is that actually is taking place within the portfolio.
So, yeah, I got to back up just a little bit. When you're in there and making these changes inside of the portfolio wizard, there's a step there that wasn't mentioned that I want to mention. Is there's a way to save your settings.
Yes, portfolio
and you
snapshot.
can back up your settings. And one of the things you can do if you are in that building phase is you could do build 1, 2, and 3. The problem is if you change the allocation factor for one reason or another, I don't know, we'd have to ask the original developer. I actually have asked him, just never save the allocation factor for some reason. Why that setting wasn't saved, I don't know. So you want to notate, that's the only thing you could do, but you could actually change slight configurations and save it, and then bounce around and rerun it and look at it to go through step by step. I've done that in the past if I'm building something, trying to come up with some concepts. So, but even just on a regular basis, whenever you make these changes, when I'm setting up to make a change, just so I can, let's say the very first thing I do is I'm going to make a save, and I'm going to call it update new, or I'm going to call update old, or original update, or original snapshot, and put a date on the save. And then I'll go in and start changing things. If I go, oh gosh, I screwed that up, I can go right back and reset it to the beginning. So I usually do I make a snapshot. The next thing I do is I'll make a save. I usually do all my stops. This is how I do it. You can do it any way you want. Do all my stop dates. I save it. Then I do all my new additions, and then I save it as a final once I've got that done. So you can go back and backtrack these steps. There's nothing more frustrating than especially if you've got a portfolio that you've updated, a 24 stock portfolio, and it's been around for 3 years, and there's now 95 stocks inside the environment that you just don't want to lose that information.
Right.
And even though we have the settings, we have a lot of this stuff, it's still something you want to have.
Yeah, and maybe that's a good thing to ask right now, Bob. Do we have time to actually pull up 2.0 and show some of these things, like within the portfolio
Sure.
wizard, how to print this off?
Sure.
Let's take a break in this presentation.
Yeah, okay, just 1 second here. And I already dated, so
And we could just create a brand new portfolio and just start fresh on some of these examples, just so we could show what this looks like.
I'm going to have to. That's one of the things I didn't do was log in. So I will do that. Let me get. Let's go while we're doing this.
So while Bob's logging on that,
We'll go back to New York Stock Exchange and talk to them.
Sounds good. What we'll do for you real quick is we'll show you, what this should look like when it comes to either adjusting the inception date. We'll pick on a pretty simple portfolio. We'll use some of the same holdings that are in our ETFDI portfolio just to keep it, I think, really easy. And then what we'll also do is we'll show you what some of the issues, if you change the inception date, what it's going to look like, as well as, if you change either some of those starts and stops, what that looks like and what you need to do to make sure that you're not going too far without creating a nice snapshot of the changes that you've made. So Bob, go ahead and let's create a new portfolio.
Yeah, hang on a second. I've got to do this, don't I?
Yeah, you're gonna have to drive for it.
Yeah, I almost started a new meeting here real quick, but all right. I want to bring that back on the screen here so everybody can see this thing. And I think I can slide this over so it will, well, then I'm in the way. Can't win. Okay.
So let's go ahead and create a new portfolio.
Let me get it over there yet. I haven't got
Okay.
it over there. Now we're over there. Okay, so we're in 2.0, and
Yep.
we're going to go to Portfolio Manager, and we're going to go to Create Modify, of course. I'm disappointed you can't do this. I don't want you to tell me everything you're doing. So talk about something here for a second. I'm going to set up a new meeting real quick so you can
Okay.
drive. I think it's just going to be easier than me trying to do everything you want to do.
Sure.
Okay.
So, one thing worth mentioning, what we've been talking about is pretty much solely focused as far as these steps within 2.0. Those of you that are using Portfolio Expert, within that platform, we do have a few additional tools within Portfolio Expert that do some auditing as far as keeping track of the changes within the portfolio. If you can construct a portfolio within Portfolio Expert, it doesn't automatically change the initial allocation factor on it. So there are some nice things that do exist within that platform. However, what most people are using is 2.0, and these things are something you're just going to have to record and keep track of, and maintain that on your side. So every time that I've constructed a portfolio, one of the things that I've done is I've taken a snapshot of it. You can either do that by doing a print screen, which is on your keyboard right above the arrow keys. If you look at the top of your keyboard, you'll see that there's a print screen button. If you just push that and then open up anything, whether it's a print Microsoft Paint program or Microsoft Word, you could paste that in there just by doing a right click and paste, and then that will be able to give you a snapshot of what the settings were when it comes to the inception date, the allocation factor, the number of securities on it. It won't list out all the securities, at least at that step, but it will give you some of the basics to keep track of. And again, if nothing else, you can certainly work off of a yellow pad of paper. I know a lot of advisors that have done that, and that works fine as long as you keep track of that. So are we up and running yet on a new glance?
No, it won't let me because it says I'm already hosting one. Even though I went into the task manager and killed it, it's still running. So
Okay.
Windows 8, hate it. So I'll have to drive here and let me get rid of some of this stuff.
Okay,
And,
sounds good.
It's just the way it is. So anyway, I have like an elaborate system here in my office, and I've never seen it so messed up. I managed to, I don't know, it's really odd.
How many monitors do you have surrounding you on any day? You have 10 monitors or something like that?
Yeah, something like that. There's one monitor, one setup was 6-headed monster, and then there's a 3-headed monster, and I've got a Mac Pro and a laptop all on the same. I'm in a wall in a U-shaped desk that has all kinds of stuff in there. But when we did the studio, we had some things that happened there. So anyway, I need to just get rid of something. There's something behind the background here, and I want to get one last thing, and I think this will clean up that. Actually, it doesn't. I know what it is now. So now we've got that fixed. Okay, so what are we going to build here?
Let's just call it a demo. That's typically what I go by whenever I create a sample portfolio for an advisor.
Okay. So here we are at demo.
All right, and let's just work off the default settings here. And what I'd like to do is maybe just toss in 3 or 4 ETFs, like the classic SPY, MDY, IJR. So we could.
So you just leave it at 09?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, because actually what I'd like to do is plug in those symbols, run the portfolio, and then I'd like to show what happens if you create a portfolio and then try changing that date.
I hate that you're not driving this.
I know. I'm also going blind right now because I lost the glance session, but...
Oh, that's actually good.
Yeah.
That's actually a good thing, because it's actually letting me start a new session, so I can let you drive this time. So 6516. So anyway, while we're going through this pane there, Mitch is live with us here.
There we go.
I just have to hopefully give him control, because that's just going to be too ridiculous to Look at that. I think you should be able to drive now.
There we go.
All right.
All right.
So yeah, while he's starting this thing to get going, this will be helpful. So I wish I had. I'm going to put it so you can see the whole screen, so you don't have to see Mitch and I in the way. Okay.
Okay.
That is done.
All right, perfect. So as I had said before, what I'm going to do with this is I'm just going to leave the default settings for this portfolio. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go right to the step where it asks to create custom portfolio. As I said before, I'm just going to put in some of some pretty common, pretty familiar holdings. So I'll just grab a lot of the components to our ETF strategy, the global equity strategy. So we have SPY, IJR, MDY, toss in SHY as well. And then we're going to go ahead and just push next. So once we've loaded up these securities, this may seem pretty basic for those of you that are watching right now. But something that people miss on occasion is this step right here where you could take a snapshot of it. So when you click on this link right next to the camera, it asks you to save the snapshot by giving it a name. And so what we'll do is we'll just put in today's date. Today's the 20th. Test 1. And then we'll just go ahead and push OK. And we'll just confirm that. And now if you look, you'll see on the drop down, we have that test 1 saved in there. And so by selecting that from the drop down, it's going to ask if I want to change any of the current settings and put it back to the snapshot. So I'm going to go ahead and push OK. And at this point, nothing has really happened. But we're going to come back to that a little bit later. So I'll go ahead and finish creating the portfolio just by pushing next here. Again, I'm going to leave these default settings. And we're going to come up to this allocation factor. And right now, it's a little hard for me to see right now. Is that 33%, Bob?
It is 33.57.
All right. So we'll just sort of tuck that away and remember that, and we're going to push next. And then we're going to allocate, finish the portfolio. So at this point, we've come up with that allocation factor by looking at the inception date of this portfolio as well as the holdings that are in this portfolio as of right now. And now the system is working with it. It's queued it up for run in this allocation queue.
Well, I want to talk about the allocation factor because everybody asks that. We can't say it enough times.
Okay.
What happens is when we set it on, what was the setting that you put it on?
I put it on high.
On high, okay, which you should do for an ETF strategy. And what the allocation does is it goes through and looks at what the average number of trades or the average number of trades in any given day throughout that whole back test history all the way back to 2009. And what it does is because we told it to use it at 100% cash, it figures out what that average number is, figures out how much of the allocation factor needs to be 100% invested on those days. So when it has the average number of trades, it's going to be 100%. If it goes a standard deviation or above that, it's going to have to reallocate. And if it is a standard deviation or less below, you're going to have cash in the strategy. So it's always targeting when VPM has its average position to utilize the cash as fully as possible. Because as I've said many times, VPM is a demand on cash versus an allocation strategy. Okay, Mitch, sorry.
That's good. So what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to go ahead and, as you can see, I've pulled up the portfolio wizard again after I ran it that first time. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and click on that step to create the custom portfolio so that we can adjust the holdings on this. So bear with me 1 second. And again, here's where I entered the tickers. You see 2 of them got put to the 1.2 to the 3.2. And now I'm just going to load it up with a few more holdings. So let's say this was a stock portfolio that I was maintaining right now. And so I was adding in a few additional positions on here. We'll just toss in a hodgepodge of things that I'm just going to grab off the top of my head.
And by the way, never mix ETFs in. Bad example today.
I know it's not the best example. I should have had a list of stocks or
That's
ETFs
okay.
to work off
That's
of.
all right. You picked
one of the things, Apple,
yeah,
wrong Apple.
Put the wrong apples. symbol.
So bear with me 1 second.
Well, just know that you have about 9 minutes to go.
I know I got to land this plane. So,
Yep.
well, what I'll do is I'll go ahead and update this. Now, if this were the normal maintenance that we had talked about, that you should be putting starts and stops in place. So let's say we did have those 3 initial positions, and now we've grown this portfolio to have a larger list, and we put in those starts and stops in place, just like you're supposed to reflect that that there's been some changes on it. So in this case,
hang on, I'm gonna make that a little smaller.
thank you.
Yeah, there you go. Take it back.
All right. So we talked about this last week. We're going to talk about it again now. If this position, in this case Apple, didn't exist at the portfolio's inception, and this is a position that I've added after the fact, I need to put this, change the initial trade here from a start to a stop, because what we're going to be doing is we're going to be turning a blind eye to this ticker until the point that we start it up at a later date. And so in this case, we're just going to go ahead and put it to January 2nd, 2014. Click apply. And now what we've done here is we've updated this portfolio to show that it was off from 2009 to 2014. And we're going to keep moving forward.
And that's still going to show as a green button because it's active. It's still active, even though you turned it off first, and it's active on January. Show a future date. Let's show next week. So don't forget to turn January 2nd to a stop.
Yep. So we'll do June.
Yep. And yeah, you want to stop that and then start. Yeah. Mitch is showing you how not to do this.
Oh, thank you. So, I guess I do have to do it to next week so that we get the right on there. What's the date on Monday?
I don't know. Just go anywhere. Just go in the 23rd. It doesn't matter if it's Monday. Because what's going to happen is when you do this, the one thing that VPM is capable of doing, so you can do your reviews at any point in time, and you could decide what date you want the actions that you're taking and updating your screen at that time. So you can see here, when it refreshed, the buttons on the side now have an orange button on there. And then maybe show them how to, I know most of you know how to do this, but this is the single one thing that we see completely messed up almost, more times than I'd like to admit. And this is, all the other stuff, there's nothing you can do to VPM that's going to cause any errors or do anything. But if you don't do this right, it doesn't know certain things that you do. It's just, someone will call up and say, well, we put the stock in and it looks like it's trading since the beginning. Well, that's because they didn't stop it first and start it. And I know it's you got to hide it first, hide away, and then you turn it on as the date you want it to go. And if you don't do that, VPM goes, I don't know what to do. It looks like it's active. I'll just trade it all along, because the logic doesn't know how to think when it sees that only a start date only that's in a future point. So and everything that comes into the portfolio always has to be on the inception date. It will automatically come in that way. So it's easy for you to go stop and then put the new date, and you can't run out of a number of dates. That box will just keep generating 4 or 5 of them. And you can do multiple turn on, turn off dates at the same time if you want, if you're like building a back test or something like that. Okay.
So what I'll do now that I've really cluttered this thing up, I'm going to create a new snapshot. So just like before, I'm going to go ahead and click this link at the top right here. It's going to ask me for a new name, so I'm going to go ahead and put in this case, we'll say, May 30th, test 2. Nice.
How about update? That's what I do. I would say use context that what the step was that you were doing. So have it as a snapshot, current snapshot as of a date, and then have, like I said, whether you do like I do, I'll put stops as of the date, and then I'll do the update or final when I'm done with everything. And that way, at least, like I said, if the worst thing is I messed up something, I realized, or I didn't like anything I did, I can go back to where I was. Remembering that allocation factor is not saved. And the most important thing when you're adding new stocks more is that you do not rerun the allocation. So the nice thing about VPM2, you can skip around that. So you don't want to run this step here, because now it says, oh wait, now you have how many
So now it's because we've added these new
Yeah,
tickers.
now you've got 8 symbols, and originally you had 5 or whatever,
Three, I think it
3
was,
or
yeah.
whatever.
3 or 4.
And so what it does is say, oh, I need to figure out what the demand on capital factor is again if you hit next. And what you want to do is you want to keep it at the original, because if you change it, guess what? All your back test, everything changes.
Yep.
And then that's when we get the phone call, hey, I added in some stocks, but my returns aren't what they used to be. That's why. And these are critical steps to make sure it's going through there. So I think actually the way this thing is going, we need to probably summarize where we're at, maybe a couple last steps here real quick.
Yep.
And then we'll summarize, and we're going to finish this stuff on Thursday, I guess.
Yeah, just want to highlight. So again, because I clicked on that initial allocation factor and then to click next or previous, it went ahead and saved that. So now I've overridden the prior allocation factors. So now if I were to look at the portfolio after I ran this, you'd see that I was much less invested, even though I did the starts and stops right potentially over here, because it's looking at these symbols right here. It's watering down the portfolio, if you will, tempering it down. So now I'm not going to be nearly as fully invested in these positions historically.
So now you're going to show them how to fix that, right?
Yep. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to go ahead and load up that last snapshot on here. And you see, it's going to prompt me to confirm, do I want to load up the snapshot? Otherwise, it's going to erase the prior changes. And by doing that, we've now been put back to where we were with the number of positions, the holdings that we had, the starts and stops that we had. And so now I can go back to my allocation factor step.
Well, I was hoping you're going to show them they wanted the 8 symbols in there and how to fix the allocation.
I'm getting there. So,
Okay.
So now that I have the right allocation factor, I could go ahead and save that.
So you didn't write it down. I did. It was
I'm just showing a different way.
35.57. Okay.
In case someone hadn't written it down.
Oh, okay.
And now I can go back and say, well, this is actually the update that I wanted. So now I have the right starts and stops. I have the original allocation factor that I should have. And now, as Bob had said, we could just skip right over that this step right here, the initial allocation factor, or we can click on it and manually type over it or copy it into there. And then we can push allocate finish portfolio. And that portfolio will be run and updated to reflect the changes that we just made on it.
Well, I kind of liked how you solved that, though. That was good. It's, young minds are good, right?
Right.
No, that was a good way to find out what the factor was, because you had the snapshot. Had you not had the snapshot, you would have been SOL, as I say, whatever
Yes.
that stands for. You would have been in trouble not being able to replace that. So we're coming into the last few minutes here. So I was talking to Mitch and I were talking offline. So let's go to another scene here. I want to go back to the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. It looks better instead of looking at my monitor. I was talking about, and when I used to do the live presentations, this was an all morning. This was a 3 to 5 hour presentation going through this stuff, because it seems really detailed. It's really not complex, but all these things, it takes a while to develop what the importance is, so that you understand what you're doing when you're running software. Because remember, it's software, and just like anything, if you put the wrong formula in Excel, you're not going to get what you thought you're going to get, and it's the same thing here. So this is the only place where you can really do this. I've tried to figure out how somehow we could do this stuff for you guys. Like you send us, okay, here's our list, and we could automatically do it, but we haven't figured that out yet. I think it's still, there's an advantage of being able to do this on your own, because it keeps you involved with your process walking forward. It feels more real than if somebody's doing. It's like anything. If somebody did your homework, yeah, you got an A, but how do you feel about it? There's something to be said about being hands-on at some level. And certainly, even if you're having a staff or an administrative person do this stuff, get engaged on the reviews. Sit down and talk about what you're doing, what was done. It's not going to take you a real long time. I had a practice that's been around for a long time. I don't know if it's still done or not, but they are literally, before any orders are done on Monday morning, they have a complete review and staff meeting over every order. So meanwhile, they're missing the open. If they're doing stocks, they're missing a lot of the elements that maybe will cause some slippage from where VPM thinks they are. It's usually not too material, but that's how they feel like that's necessary. There's multiple advisors in this group, and they want to make sure everybody understands what's going on with the portfolio, even if it's incremental changes that are being triggered by VPM. That way, everybody's on the same page, and it's fine. They're just going to have slight deviations from the price entries, and sometimes they're going to be better, and sometimes it's going to be worse. As long as that's what they do, maybe they should have a 10 o'clock deadline. Markets open within a half hour. They have to review and get the orders going. But there can be some deviation on some of that from a slippage standpoint. So go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to jump in on that. I've talked with a lot of advisors over the years about, if they happen to have an investment committee meeting, that they do that at the beginning of the week as opposed to the end of the week. First off, because anything that you talk about during that meeting, you need to give yourself ample time to actually be able to achieve that work, so you're not talking about it and then going into the weekend on Friday. But what that also does is it's a great opportunity by having it first thing on Monday mornings. It gives you a platform to talk about what orders came out of the system, what these orders mean for the portfolios, where the portfolios are currently allocated, so that whether it's just you have to place the trades, or if you have a team like Bob was referencing, that all the advisors are on the same page, so that when they go into that week's appointments with clients, that they've been properly informed as to where they're at, so they can inform the clients consequently of what's going on with those portfolios, and just gives them the ability to have better conversations with clients.
So, and that works really good as long as you're not on the West Coast.
Yeah, that's true.
So anyway, unless you decide to still do it at 10 o'clock, which is 1 o'clock New York time, so maybe you get them done by the close. If you're doing
at least Monday, I'd say.
Well, if you're doing mutual fund strategies, that certainly works. You can do that. But if ETFs, there's going to be some deviation as these markets. Well, we're over time. We appreciate again this going. Looks like we're going to have a continuation of this meeting today. There's a couple of things I know I want to cover yet, and we'll work through that. And we will see you on Thursday at Process Warriors. But don't forget tomorrow morning. Market closed down 1224 at 1872.84. So we'll be reviewing all the activity and if there's any new things to point to after today's activity. So once again, folks, thanks for everything. Thanks for being loyal supporters and customers, and we shall see you tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., I guess noon New York time, 9 a.m. my time. Thanks a lot. Bye now.